After decades of searching, Kathleen Martinez may have uncovered a major clue.
The divine connection between Cleopatra and Isis could be the way to reveal her tomb. After years of research, I thought I had to test my theory.
For over 2 millennia, we believed we understood Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt, the brilliant strategist who captivated emperors, the icon frozen in marble and legend. Her story has been told as romance, as tragedy, as political genius.
From Caesar to Shakespeare to modern cinema, her story has remained as popular as ever. Her name despised, idolized, and mythologized. Cleopatra.
But the legend was only the surface. In 2025, researchers reconstructed her DNA from newly analyzed remains linked to her royal bloodline, and the results stunned historians and geneticists alike. For generations, her dynasty had married within itself, preserving power by repeating the same fragile lineage. The science suggested devastating consequences, a hereditary burden that should have weakened any heir born into it. By every medical expectation, she should have been frail, compromised, unfit to endure the brutal world she ruled. And yet, she thrived. How did a queen born into genetic peril command armies, outmaneuver Rome, and sustain absolute authority in one of history's most volatile eras? Was her resilience an extraordinary twist of biology? Or did she conceal private struggles behind ceremony, intellect, and calculated charm? Beneath the golden crown and kohl-lined gaze lies a story far more complex and perhaps far darker than the myth we thought we knew. Secrets of Taposiris Magna. For 2 millennia, the location of Cleopatra's tomb has remained history's most persistent mystery.
For 2,000 years, the final resting place of Cleopatra and Mark Antony has been history's most coveted mystery.
Experts insisted she was gone forever, buried somewhere beneath the modern streets of Alexandria, swallowed by earthquakes and rising Mediterranean tides. The consensus was absolute. The last pharaoh had vanished without a trace, and no amount of searching would ever bring her back. But for 20 years, one woman refused to accept that verdict.
For 20 years, I've been searching for Queen Cleopatra.
Her name is Kathleen Martinez, and she approached Cleopatra's disappearance not like an archaeologist, but like a criminal investigator reconstructing a murder. Martinez is not your typical academic. She is a criminal lawyer from the Dominican Republic who traded courtrooms for excavation sites. She studied the ancient sources the way a detective studies witness statements, looking for inconsistencies, hidden motives, and clues that others had overlooked. While every other researcher focused on Alexandria, Martinez looked somewhere else entirely. Her profile of the suspect led her 30 miles west to a crumbling temple complex called Taposiris Magna that most historians had dismissed as insignificant.
Kathleen Martinez was granted a temporary license to dig at Taposiris Magna.
She believed Cleopatra had chosen to be buried far from the city that bore her name, in a location designed to remain hidden from Roman hands forever. In 2022, the ground beneath Martinez's feet revealed something extraordinary. Ground-penetrating radar detected a massive anomaly beneath the temple foundations. When her team broke through the limestone, they discovered a tunnel that defied explanation. Carved through solid bedrock, it stretched over 4,300 feet, nearly a mile in length. The passage stood 6 feet high, mostly submerged in mud and groundwater, and it headed straight toward the Mediterranean Sea.
The tunnel stretches from the southern slopes of a limestone ridge to the shore of the Mediterranean Sea in the north.
Engineers who studied the structure called it a geometric wonder, an engineering triumph that stands beside the famous ancient Greek tunnel of Samos. The accuracy needed to cut a mile-long corridor through unstable rock without modern tools should have been unthinkable. The question that troubled the research team was simple yet profound. Why would anyone go to such incredible lengths? You do not build a mile-long underground passage for a small religious site. This scale of work suggests importance far beyond anything the historical record had indicated. The discovery of a submerged harbor off the nearby shore added another layer of intrigue. Taposiris Magna was not a forgotten rural temple. It was a center. It linked to trade routes that have since disappeared beneath the sea. Martinez believes the tunnel leads to the end of the hunt. Her theory is chillingly logical. Cleopatra was not simply hiding from death, she was hiding from Rome. She had seen her sister dragged through the streets of the capital in chains, displayed as a prize before mocking crowds. She knew that if Octavian seized her, the same destiny awaited. Even worse, her body would be violated, her tomb plundered, her legacy wiped away. She wished to be buried beside her lover, Mark Antony, remembered as the living image of the goddess Isis in a sanctuary that could never be profaned. She hid herself where she believed no one would ever search. And for 2,000 years, she was correct. Inside the temple grounds, Martinez's team uncovered a finding that sent shivers through the archaeological world. Hidden within 16 rock-carved tombs were mummies, but these were not typical burials. When researchers studied the weathered faces of the dead, they noticed something shining in the shadows. Gold. Where their tongues should have been, amulets of pressed gold leaf had been set inside their mouths. The ancient Egyptians believed that survival in the afterlife depended on your power to speak to Osiris, the ruler of the underworld. A golden tongue granted what the priests described as golden eloquence, the gift to speak directly to the gods. Martinez believes these mummies were Cleopatra's trusted circle, buried here with the holy power to declare the arrival of their queen. If her attendants are waiting with golden tongues to proclaim her presence, then the entrance to Cleopatra's final resting place may be nearer than anyone imagined. But while Martinez continues to dig toward that entrance, science has already offered a glimpse into Cleopatra's genetic truth, and what it reveals is far more unsettling than any treasure that might lie within her tomb. Genetic illusion. To uncover Cleopatra's DNA, researchers first turned not to the queen herself, but to her slain sister. Arsinoe IV was Cleopatra's fierce rival, a woman whose ambition nearly took everything from her. When Cleopatra was driven out of Egypt during a struggle for power, it was Arsinoe who claimed the throne. When Julius Caesar arrived to resolve Egyptian conflict, it was Arsinoe who commanded an army against him, even succeeding in trapping the Roman general inside the palace of Alexandria. She was a warrior princess who came within moments of reshaping history. But history belongs to those who survive. Arsinoe was later captured, taken to Rome, and forced to walk in chains during Caesar's victory parade. The Roman crowds, stirred by the sight of a teenage girl in shackles, cried for her. That unexpected mercy spared her life, and she was sent into exile at the Temple of Artemis, in Ephesus, in what is now present-day Turkey. She believed the holy ground would shield her. She was mistaken. In 41 BCE, Cleopatra convinced Mark Antony to dispatch assassins to the temple steps. They pulled Arsinoe from the sanctuary and killed her. It was a scandal that stunned the ancient world, but for modern researchers, the killing offered something priceless: a site. We knew exactly where it happened. For more than a century, archaeologists believed they had uncovered Arsinoe's remains. In the early 1900s, digs in Ephesus revealed a distinctive tomb called the Octagon. The design mattered, an architectural nod to the famed Pharos lighthouse of Alexandria. Inside the chamber lay a skeleton belonging to a young individual. The timeline aligned, the place aligned, the age aligned. If this was Arsinoe, researchers had a path to Cleopatra's genetic code through her sister's bones. Early studies suggested the deceased had an African mother. The idea sparked intense debate over whether history had lightened the image of Egypt's rulers. But science often shatters easy assumptions. The skull had been lost during World War II, then found again in the University of Vienna archives in 2022. When researchers finally examined it with modern tools using micro-CT scans and extracted DNA from the petrous temporal bone, the findings shattered the Arsinoe theory entirely. The skeleton was not a 20-year-old woman. It was not an African princess. The DNA showed a Y chromosome. The bones belonged to a boy between 11 and 14 years old, and he suffered from serious developmental disorders. His jaw underdeveloped, his skull uneven and distorted. His genetic markers traced not to Egypt, but to Italy or Sardinia. The scientific evidence of Cleopatra's lineage through this skeleton proved to be an illusion. We return to the historical record, and the historical record reveals something far more unsettling than any argument about ethnicity: Cleopatra's genetic miracle. In a typical family tree, the branches spread upward like roots stretching toward light. You have 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents, 16 ancestors in the generation before that. The further back you follow your lineage, the more people shape your genetic identity. It is a funnel opening toward the world, drawing from an ever-growing pool of humanity, blending traits and balancing weaknesses with strengths. Each generation brings fresh blood, new pairings, protection against the risky buildup of harmful genes. This is how biology should function. This is how humans are meant to reproduce. Cleopatra's family tree did not spread. It folded inward like a fading star, crushed by its own force. The same names repeat again and again, filling multiple places at once, until the tree no longer looks like a tree and instead resembles a twisted knot that cannot be untangled. The Ptolemies were a Greek dynasty that ruled Egypt, descendants of one of Alexander the Great's generals, who claimed a kingdom from the conqueror's shattered empire. They were foreigners in an unfamiliar land, and they were fixated on preserving total control. To stop their bloodline from being weakened by Egyptian nobles or competing Greek families, they embraced the ancient pharaonic tradition of incestuous marriage. But they did not simply marry cousins, as many royal houses across history have done. They married siblings. Brother married sister. Uncle married niece. Father married daughter. Generation after generation, the same genetic material bent back on itself, concentrating inherited traits, both favorable and disastrous, into an ever-tightening pool. Historians believe Cleopatra's own parents, Ptolemy XII and Cleopatra V, were likely full brother and sister, born to the same mother and father. Her grandparents may have been uncle and niece, or perhaps siblings as well. The records are unclear, but the pattern is undeniable. By the time Cleopatra was born, her family had been practicing close incest for nearly 3 centuries. The genetic diversity that shields most humans from inherited illness had been deliberately removed from her bloodline. Geneticists have a name for this pattern. They call it pedigree collapse, and they measure its intensity using something known as the coefficient of inbreeding. This figure represents the likelihood that any 2 genes in your body are identical copies passed down from the same ancestor. In a genetically varied population, that coefficient nears 0. The child of 2 first cousins has a coefficient of about 6%, high enough to cause concern, but still within limits that most humans can handle without severe outcomes. Cleopatra's coefficient surpassed 45%. Almost half of her genetic code consisted of identical copies, the same sequences repeating without the variation that usually guards against disease. To grasp what that number means in human reality, look at the Habsburg dynasty of Spain. They practiced similar intermarriage for political reasons, marrying cousins and nieces to keep their empire intact. Charles II, the last Habsburg king, had a coefficient of roughly 25%, about half of Cleopatra's. His autopsy became one of the most unsettling medical records in history. Doctors noted that his heart was the size of a peppercorn. His head was filled with fluid. His body contained not a single trace of blood. He could not speak until age 4. He could not walk until age 8. His jaw was so badly deformed that his upper and lower teeth could never align, forcing him to swallow every meal whole without chewing. He endured constant seizures, deep cognitive impairment, and physical weakness that left him a puppet controlled by stronger figures around him. He died at 38, the final member of his line, a dynasty that had literally bred itself into extinction. Cleopatra's coefficient was almost twice that of Charles II, and by every measure of genetic science, she should have been worse. She should have been born with obvious deformities that made public life impossible. She should have faced cognitive limits that blocked complex thinking. Her body should have struggled to survive beyond childhood. The mathematics of inbreeding did not predict a queen. They predicted a monster. Yet history describes a brilliant mind who spoke 9 languages fluently, led naval fleets into battle, and influenced the 2 most powerful men in the Roman world. The woman who should have been ruined by her own blood became one of the most formidable rulers of the ancient world. And that stunning contradiction is exactly what makes researchers suspect that something else was unfolding beneath the surface. The strength born from sickness. The strange contradiction of Cleopatra's supposed health has pushed researchers to revisit the historical record with fresh eyes. They are no longer trying to prove her legendary beauty. Instead, they are searching for signs that earlier generations brushed off as personality traits or glorified as signs of brilliance. And what they are beginning to uncover hints that the genetic time bomb created by centuries of incest may have been ticking within her all along. Begin with her ancestors, because their bodies reveal what hers likely suffered. Ptolemy VII, Cleopatra's great-uncle, and a direct genetic reflection due to the tightly intertwined family line, was a living medical disaster. They called him Physcon, meaning pot-belly, but even that nickname softened the truth. Historical accounts describe him as severely obese, with limbs too frail to carry his enormous body. He depended on attendants to physically support him whenever he tried to walk. He dressed in sheer, see-through robes that shocked Roman visitors who saw his court. But examine those ancient accounts more closely. Sources clearly note a swollen neck, noticeably protruding eyes, and persistent breathlessness that troubled him throughout his rule. These are not merely signs of royal excess. They are classic symptoms of Graves's disease, an autoimmune condition that attacks the thyroid and disrupts the entire body. Graves's disease does far more than alter appearance. It overwhelms the body with thyroid hormones, creating a non-stop state of hyperactivity that denies the body any real rest. The symptoms sound strikingly like a portrait of Cleopatra herself. Restless energy that stretches deep into the night. Rapid speech that overtakes conversations. Ongoing insomnia that keeps the mind racing until sunrise. Anxiety that appears as daring, high-risk decisions. The disorder pushes people toward impulsive actions, toward risks that seem unreasonable to outside observers. Historians have long admired Cleopatra for her tireless vitality, her famed ability to labor through the night while others fell from exhaustion, her constant drive and unyielding ambition that never appeared to fade. We interpreted all of it as brilliance. We honored it as evidence of her remarkable character. Now medical scholars are raising a far more unsettling question. Was the blaze within Cleopatra actually illness? Was the famed energy that fueled her reign the product of a hereditary thyroid storm inherited from Physcon and his troubled bloodline? The surviving images from her own era tell a tale that challenges every Hollywood illusion. Study the silver tetradrachms struck during her reign, coins she personally sanctioned as likenesses of herself. They display the Ptolemaic nose, a pronounced hooked aquiline shape common in the dynasty. She bears a strong, projecting chin that stands out with clear authority. And most notably, she shows a distinctly thick neck that modern medical experts immediately recognize. A thick neck is a well-known sign of goiter, the thyroid enlargement linked to Graves's disease. If Cleopatra inherited the condition that visibly marked her forebears, then those coins may reveal a symptom her contemporaries either did not understand or tactfully chose to overlook. Then there is the matter of her build, and here the ancient records become difficult to ignore. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe to support the channel and stay updated on future videos.